Colombia's president isn't happy about the Trump administration's war on drugs, as the South American leader shockingly suggested it may be time to, quote, get rid of Trump. Plus, a high-ranking administration job is not going to happen for the Republican nominee because he just backed out after his offensive texts were discovered. In them, he sympathizes with Nazis. So I'm going to tell you all about something called vice signaling and a Texas woman on trial for vehicular manslaughter. She's blaming the deadly crash on the most unlikely of causes. Those stories and more today, Wednesday, October 22nd. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. President Trump does not like Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who he firmly believes is letting the illicit drug trade run rampant, and their feud is heating up. The South American leader recently gave an interview where he suggested Trump change his tune, and if he doesn't, then, quote, get rid of Trump. He followed it with a dramatic snap of his fingers just for emphasis. Now, that could sound like a not-so-veiled threat, albeit that this was through translation from Spanish, but enough people took it as one that Petro had to go on X to clarify that he wasn't, in fact, threatening the leader of the free world. Florida Congressman Carlos Jimenez was one of those people concerned with Petro's comments, and he posted on X, quote, Petro's threats must be taken seriously. He is a genuine threat to the safety and security of our hemisphere. Now, in that same interview, Petro did also admit that his country is out of control, something President Trump has said basically word for word. President Trump had big plans for Russia and Ukraine to move closer to peace. Had being the operative word here. The upcoming face-to-face meeting with Vladimir Putin scheduled to be held in Budapest is no longer on the calendar. And I'll give you one guess as to the reason. Hint, it's not the Americans. The announcement came from the White House after a call between Secretary of State Marco Rubio and his Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov. That call was supposed to lay the groundwork for a second summit. A source familiar with that Rubio call, though, said that, surprise, surprise, the Kremlin showed an unwillingness to commit to the Trump administration's peace strategy.
I don't want to have a wasted meeting. I don't want to have a waste of time, so I'll see what happens.
After news of the summit's demise, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky took to social media with a theory as to why the Russians suddenly will not come to the table. And it has to do with those much discussed Tomahawk missiles that Ukraine wants from the US. These are the ones with the potential to really damage Mother Russia. Zelensky believes that Russia was willing to play ball when it looked like Trump was going to hand those missiles over. But now that President Trump is holding on to them for the time being, Russia's willingness to make a deal just disappeared. President Trump wants $230 million from the Department of Justice. The president is seeking a financial settlement to resolve complaints of being targeted by the FBI, first in the Russiagate investigation and then in the federal raid of Mar-a-Lago to retrieve classified documents. A representative of the president's personal legal team said in a statement, quote, President Trump continues to fight back against all Democrat-led witch hunts. Now, the DOJ is currently run by Attorney General Pam Bondi and funded by American tax dollars. The president himself was asked about his legal efforts, and after at first seeming not to know what the heck the reporter was talking about, he then offered this.
They probably owe me a lot of money, but if I get money from our country, I'll do something nice with it, like give it to charity or give it to the White House while we restore the White House.
Paul Ingrasso, President Trump's pick to run the Office of Special Counsel, is backing out after a series of leaked texts allegedly included him bragging about having a, quote, Nazi streak. Now, he was scheduled for a Senate confirmation hearing this Thursday. He had hoped to be the head of the agency that basically aims to keep federal workers safe from things like whistleblowing reprisals, prohibited practices, stuff like that. But growing pressure from Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Florida's Rick Scott, Wisconsin's Ron Johnson, and surely many others ended his bid. The inflammatory texts allegedly include Ingrasso saying that the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, quote, should be ended and tossed into the seventh circle of hell where it belongs. And in another, quote, I do have a Nazi streak in me from time to time, I will admit it. Ingrasso's lawyer suggested that the text could have been manipulated and claimed that if they weren't, they were clearly self-deprecating and satirical. But that doesn't appear to be clear to everyone. These texts come less than a week after Politico reported a group of young Republican leaders traded equally racist and anti-Semitic texts that resulted in most of them losing their jobs. So what is going on here? I decided it was time to dig into all of this with Post columnist Rikki Schlott, and I spoke to her just before the news of Ingrasso dropping out of consideration broke. So, Ricky, first of all, where did this guy come from? I hadn't really heard his name prior to all of this.
Yeah, he's kind of been a minor figure. He's a 31-year-old attorney who had previously been serving as the White House liaison to the DHS since this year, but just recently was appointed to the Special Counsel of the United States. There's a Senate confirmation hearing coming up this Thursday, but now with this Politico report coming out with messages between him and half a dozen other Republicans, that obviously seems to be much more up in the air. Some of the texts that he sent included, "I do have a Nazi streak in me from time to time, I will admit it." He also said that MLK was the George Floyd of the 1960s. He said his holiday should be in hell, and he also advocated for getting rid of Kwanzaa and Juneteenth. So Senate Majority Leader John Thune just said he's not going to pass, and it seems like now with three other Republicans already committing to denying his confirmation, it's up in the air, and Thursday is coming up fast.
Yeah, it does not seem, at least to me, we're not that we're in the prediction game, but that this guy can cross the finish line considering what's contained in those text messages. I mean, the Nazi line is one thing, and then the comma, I'll admit it, is just adds insult to injury.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think being a rather minor figure before too is not working to his benefit either. And this seems to be this larger trend, I think, in the younger conservative movement. I mean, he's only in his early 30s, and there seems to be this kind of desire to prove that you're so far from the virtue signaling woke left that you're politically incorrect to the most extreme degree. It's proving allegiance and sending the most edgy, brash, over the top, offensive texts and messages that you possibly can imagine. And that's a really regressive and reactionary overreaction to political correctness, and I think a really bad precedent to set. So it's disappointing to see that this is now the second similar news story in the same kind of vein in just about a week.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was going to go with my next question. It seems like since Trump has gotten back into office, those on the left have sort of been crying, Nazi, since he was kind of sworn in a lot of policies or comments. And then, of course, as you said, we have two instances in a week of particularly younger Republican men seemingly embracing this term. So do you really think it comes down to, like you said, an overreaction, an over course correction of we are so desperate not to look woke, not to look left, that we're going to fly so far onto the other side that it's truly problematic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is kind of part of a group initiation ritual, sort of human instinct that you saw on the left in a different iteration, when people would go so far out of their way to virtue signal, to show that they are using all the correct language, to post photos from the trendy protests that they go to, and to prove that they're a member of the in-group, in a kind of bonding ritual and self-flagellating over whatever identity they might have that makes them privileged, etc. And now on the kind of inverse flip side of this virtue signaling, you have this vice signaling going on the right, in my view, of proving that you're part of this new in-group, now that I think conservatives really have this new cultural ascendancy. I was thinking about the fact that these kids are young Republicans. It wasn't that long ago that I was on a college campus and more conservative, and that was not a trendy thing to be at all. There was no real group or group chat or social connectivity of conservatives in the young world at that point in time. And then all of a sudden it's kind of a fashionable thing to do. And I almost wonder how much it's proving I'm in on the joke. I'm as edgy as you. I'm as far from the mainstream and as far from the ascendant left that's been our woke overlords as everyone else in this group too. And I mean, I think this is definitely, if it continues, is going to backfire tremendously on conservatives, because when you see these messages out of context and in isolation, they're shocking, they're hugely offensive, and they're completely just inexcusable. But I do think that it's part of this group dynamic of proving that you're part of the group and really in on the joke too.
It just seems like, as you're describing this, I'm seeing how divided the bases of both political parties are here. But when I really think about it, when I think about what your experience was like on your college campus, for the majority of people, right and left, they're not as extreme. So do you feel like this is going to alienate more conservatives in that way to someone who would say, I would never associate myself with a Nazi, but I'm also conservative. So where do I land?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we've had a problem with kind of an exhausted majority in the middle, and a sense that the two-party system does not actually serve, at least in my view, such a diverse country as our own. So I do think that this is the sort of language and rhetoric that can be very alienating to people. I mean, this is a news soundbite that if you see, and that's kind of your impression of the Republican Party for this week, obviously that's going to leave a bad taste in your mouth if you're a day-to-day voter. And I think that this is really an opportunity for the conservative movement to come forward and say, no, absolutely not. This is not what we stand for. These are some fringe individuals saying awful things in their private messages, and we have no problem unequivocally just saying that, no, we don't stand for this, we don't accept this, and this is not part of our movement. And to their credit, the Young Republicans national chapter did do that. And I think that they hopefully can be an example for a broader conservative movement to say that this is fringe, this is an overreaction, and this does not define the right wing of America.
It does seem like, as you're explaining it in that way, all I can think of is when these things happen on either side of the political spectrum, on those fringes, that most of whatever party it is should come out, denounce it, and just say that's an extreme view. Whatever the extreme, insulting, problematic view is, it just seems like it would be more cohesive to bring more people together as opposed to digging in your heels. So it is nice to see that the national chapter is like, hey, that's not us. And I love the point that you brought up, that if you're a casual voter and you happen to be looking at the news this week, you turn on the TV and the word Nazi pops up, it's going to get your attention. So that really is, a scary thing for the party, especially as we're rolling into the midterms, to think about.
Absolutely. I mean, I think just kind of flippantly insulting huge swaths of Americans in different ethnic groups and religious groups is certainly not a winning strategy. I mean, that just goes without saying. And hopefully this can be kind of a moment of unison on the right of saying, this has been a pretty bad week in terms of private group chats on Politico. And this is not defining half of the country. And there's a home on the right for people who might be a part of an identity group that has been offended by these really heinous texts. And that's just not reflective of who we are.
You know, Ricky, it should go without saying, but I really think that point that you just made should be printed up and handed out to every single politician out there. Just don't go there. Like, let's make it nice. We can have different opinions, but let's make it about the issues and make it nice. Ricky, I will definitely have you back. This was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
The Trump administration is reinstating some student loan forgiveness plans that it had previously blocked. Now, this all started when President Biden announced a repayment program where borrowers' monthly bills would be based on their salary. A court then blocked that plan, so when President Trump began a second term, his education department blocked similar programs, citing that very same court ruling. After more court battles and negotiations with the American Federation of Teachers, the administration has done an about-face and will now allow loan forgiveness for borrowers that use these salary-based repayment programs after all. Now, if you're listening and you're wondering if you qualify, go to studentaid.gov, select My Aid or View Details, and look at your loan breakdown. There, you're going to find each loan that you have and the repayment program attached to it. That all said, this still needs final court approval, and the timeline for that is just unclear at this point. And finally today, a story that could totally be an episode of The Hunting Wives. A wealthy Texas housewife is accused of mowing down a guy in her car while she was wasted and killing him. But the fact that she was drunk and high had nothing to do with it, according to the driver. Instead, she's blaming her shoes, namely a pair of expensive red bottoms. In some real 1% problems, this lady says her Christian Louboutins got stuck on the gas pedal of her Porsche 911 Carrera. 34-year-old Christina Chambers went on trial Friday, charged with manslaughter in connection to the 2023 death of Joseph McMullen. That night, McMullen was on a first date and he was leaving Voodoo Donuts in Houston when prosecutors alleged that Chambers, who'd been bar hopping with friends and was 4 times over the legal alcohol limit, plowed her vehicle into him. She was also allegedly found with small bags of cocaine on her at the time. But Chambers' lawyer is singing a different and highfalutin tune, claiming a pair of bougie heels got stuck as she drove down what he says is one of the most dangerous curves in all of Houston. The prosecutor, however, argues that McMullen was actually just trying to show off her fancy sports car in her fancy shoes while under the influence. Now, if you didn't get that Hunting Wives reference at the top of the story, season 1 is on Netflix if you dare, but get out the popcorn, maybe a glass of wine. Do not, under any circumstances, watch it with the kids. Trust me. All right, that wraps it up for today. Don't forget, before you leave, like and follow the New York Postcast wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. It helps the almighty algorithm find other people who need to know about this podcast, and we all know how great it is. See you tomorrow.